Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the launch of Heather Rose's new memoir, Nothing Bad Ever Happens Here. If you have a phone on you, if you wouldn't mind switching that to silent, that would be lovely. Now, before we begin, in recognition of the deep history and culture of this island, I would like to acknowledge the Tasmanian Aboriginal peoples as the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting, as well as its original storytellers, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Now, it's my pleasure to be with you this evening for the launch of Heather's new book. There's a new Heather Rose coming. It's a kind of excitable thing that booksellers and publishers say to each other at conferences. It's always a big deal. Heather's last book, Bruni, and I remember the conference at Adelaide I was at when I learned that it was coming, stayed on our bestseller list for more than a year, and it still flies off the shelves at an impressive rate. It's not at all a stretch to say that Heather is one of the biggest names in Tasmanian letters. So you're in for a treat this evening, and I would now like to introduce you to Melinda Rose. Melinda is the Nursing Director for Safe Medication Practice under the Tasmanian Health Service statewide hospital pharmacy. Being Heather's younger, fitter, and far more capable sister, she's well versed in taking on the harder things in life. Melinda has a Master's in Emergency Nursing, which I'm sure is the primary qualification for this evening, and she will be your MC. Thank you, Melinda.
Good evening. Hello. Thank you, Tim, for the acknowledgement of country and for the warm welcome. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us tonight. It is my honour and great privilege to lead the proceedings here for the launch of Nothing Bad Ever Happens Here. This is Heather Rose's 9th book and the first work of non-fiction. When Heather asked me to participate in tonight's proceedings, I was deeply touched and felt it was entirely appropriate to participate in the launch of this deeply emotional and personal memoir. As you would appreciate, it takes a team to have an author's work reach you, the readers. And tonight we are joined by a number of Heather's team. We have, first, Jane Palfreman from Allen and Unwin. Jane's list at Allen and Unwin boasts more literary prize winners than any other Australian publisher. She is loved by her loyal authors and deeply respected by everyone in the publishing industry. Jane is the publisher of the Museum of Modern Love, Bruni, and now Nothing Bad Ever Happens Here. Please join me in welcoming Jane to the podium.
Thanks, Melinda, and it's beautiful to be here again. Hi, everyone. It's an honour and a joy to be here tonight, not only to mark the launch of a very special book, but to celebrate and honour one of our finest writers, the magnificent Heather Rose. All of us here will have read Heather's acclaimed and award-winning fiction and know that every one of her novels is completely different from the others. Each one takes us to vastly different but ingeniously imagined and meticulously created worlds. This time, though, Heather takes us somewhere utterly new, to herself. We become what we are, writes Heather, story by story, piece by piece. And in showing us herself with such honesty and love, and how she became herself, Heather also shows us new ways of seeing and understanding ourselves and the world. To quote Heather again, it feels dangerous to be vulnerable, dangerous to forgive, dangerous to love, that this is where courage begins. I reckon courage begins with Heather, with her extraordinary generosity, her clear eyes and open heart, in writing this luminous, transformational and utterly surprising memoir. Novelist Hannah Kent says of Nothing Bad Ever Happens Here, "I drank this book like a glass of water I didn't know I was pining for." Heather bravely and compassionately examines what it means to be human, to suffer, to live in joy. This book is a love song dedicated to the exquisite mysteries of being. I adored it. Thanks, thanks, Hannah. Endorsements don't come much better than that. I agree. I think this is going to be a memoir that many, many people are going to adore. It already feels like a classic. One of those books you press upon friends and discuss endlessly, whose every page is marked because so many lines are quotable and wise. There are moments of great pain, haunting sadness, perfect human moments transformed by Heather's heart and skill into bursts of light. Her hard-won lessons are there for us all. As she writes, in the darkness of life, there is an invitation for expansion. What an astonishing gift you have given us, Heather. A book to comfort, inspire, enlighten, and spark awe in us, to expand us and our possibilities and connections. Many thanks to you, Heather, for this gift, and to you and Gabby for your faith in us, for entrusting us with your precious, vital book. Alan and Unwin is just so proud to publish you. I just want to quickly thank my fabulous colleagues, proud members of Team Heather, who worked with such passion and expertise on this book. I know Heather will be mentioning them all, but I just want to especially mention our queen in Hobart, PR genius, Christine Farmer, who's pulled off some quite amazing, impossible feats, which we can tell you about later. May Nothing Bad Ever Happens Here fly and fly. I could not be more proud to be publishing it. Congratulations, Heather.
Thanks, Jane. I hope that that's given you a taste of excitement to read this work. It is a marvellous piece of writing, and I'm sure you're intrigued now if you haven't read anything about it yet. Another of Team Heather is the wonderful and most supportive Gabby Nair. Gabby has been Heather's literary agent for 20 years, and she has over 30 years' experience in the book industry. Her clients include New York Times #1 bestseller author Candice Fox, Dr. Norman Swan, a personal hero of mine, and Stella Prize-winning author, of course, Heather Rose. Prior to establishing the Nair Agency in May 2008, Gabby worked as a literary agent, publicist and bookseller in Sydney, London and New York. She is the author of 4 books and has a doctorate of creative arts. She is former president of the Australian Literary Agents Association and a patrol captain at Bronte Surf Lifesaving Club. She is the co-director of Left Bank Literary, Australia's premier literary agency. Please join me in welcoming Gabby.
I'm a ring-in, invited to the stage about 3 hours ago, so I don't have much to say for myself. Unusual. It's a commonly held belief that agents are all about doing deals, doing lunch, and doing lines. But what underpins agenting for me is the thrill of discovery. And yes, this means getting down and getting dirty in the slush pile. Back in 1997, 25 years ago, I worked at Australia's preeminent literary agency, Hickson Associates. And I was indeed getting down and getting dirty, because in those days many trees were sacrificed as writers pitched their work to agents and publishers. There, amongst all the dead wood, was a curious, beguiling and beautiful debut novel called Whiteheart. It told the story of a young Australian woman, Sundancer, who was dreaming of her brother Ambrose, a mythical seeming hunter of Tasmanian tigers. At the time, I was a young woman dreaming of my biological father, who had died a couple of years earlier after spending only one day with me. He too was a mythical figure. Part French-Canadian, part First Nation, he was a motorcycle riding barrister with Algonquin blood running through his veins. It's no exaggeration to say that walking alongside Heather Rose, as she became the literary lioness who will stand before us in a moment, has been one of the greatest joys of my working life. And the friendship that has grown between us is a testament to our shared love of words, of the ocean, of mystery, of ritual, and of each other. Heather, I'm so very proud of you and of what we've worked hard, what did I say there? And the way we've worked together, and of your exquisite memoir that is the culmination of all of this.
And we have the wonderful Davini Malcolm for me to introduce. Davini and I met in New York at the New York launch of the Museum of Modern Love, and I instantly bonded with her. She is a truly warm and beautiful person, and it is my great pleasure to welcome her tonight to launch this wonderful book into the world. So welcome, Davini. Please come and join us. Oh, I beg your pardon. I have a whole lot more to say about you before I join. Davini deserves a much more robust introduction than that. So I will give you that, Davini. She is an actress and film producer with over 35 years' experience in film and television. She's appeared in many of Australia's iconic TV shows, including Neighbours, Prisoner, Law of the Land, Flying Doctors, Wentworth, one of my favourite, Secret Life of Us, which I revisited quite recently and noticed there she was. There she is. And Winners and Losers. She has been directed in films by the likes of Fred Shepsey, George Miller and Russell Mulcahy. Davini was recently nominated for Best Supporting Actress at the Lee Strasberg Film Awards in New York and the Prisma Film Awards in Rome this year. She is currently producing and directing her first feature film, Love, Tea and Epiphany. Davini lives in the Yarra Valley, Victoria, and I warmly welcome you now to the stage.
Hello everyone. Need to put my specs on. Okay, I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we gathered today and extend this respect and recognition to all First Nations people in Australia and any of you that may be here today. Thank you. Well, good evening. It's my pleasure to be here with you all to celebrate and wish well the release of Heather Rose's memoir, Nothing Bad Ever Happens Here. I had the opportunity and the pleasure to read Heather's manuscript a little while ago. I went off on my husband's boat with him. I decided to print the PDF out on paper, a bit old school, take it in a folder, and I just didn't want to read it on a computer screen. It just didn't feel right to me, really. And I remember holding the printed pages. Oh, sorry, I feel emotional about this. Imagining the enormity of what it must have taken for Heather to write this memoir. Such courage. In Heather's own words, writing takes all of me, and this memoir is the hardest thing I've ever written. I hugged these pages for a few moments longer and jumped off the cliff into Heather's world of raw-edged spirituality, grief, passion, intimacy, tenacity and magic. Sorry. Beautiful and mesmerising. Funny and delightful is this memoir. The world of daughter, sister, mother, friend, colleague, spiritual warrior woman and artist. A fascinating insight into that which ultimately led to Heather becoming the extraordinary author that she is today. As many of you know who have enjoyed her novels over the years, her way with words, her poetry, her invitation to us all to join her in her deepest chambers of heart and soul took immense courage. As a long-time friend of Heather's, I have still learnt so much more about her life because of her generosity of intimacy in her writing of her life story. I honestly, to be honest, I don't know how she got some of or all of those books written, to be honest. Woven between parenting, running an advertising agency, a nomination for Telstra Businesswoman of the Year a million years ago, coaching a hockey team for the kids, and all the while navigating a very painful chronic arthritic condition that would flare suddenly and cripple her for weeks and sometimes months. Nothing bad ever happens here has magic and stardust in its telling, rather like walking through the back of the wardrobe into Narnia, in my opinion. Heather's sharing of life lived sits between the worlds in some ways, real life and ancient sacred tale. So much so that at times I forgot that I was reading about my friend's life. Such are the many adventures that Heather has lived through. I noted influences within Heather's life that I could recognise as the genesis for certain characters in her novels. It was these little sparks. It's like, oh, that's so-and-so in that novel and that's that. And that in itself was extremely fascinating to observe. I read one chapter which was set in the Central Australian desert, a trip that Heather and I and a few people here tonight shared back in the early 90s sometime. I felt vulnerable reading this chapter as I also had quite the spiritual expansion as Heather did, and for both of us it took a long time to recover from that. But in reading of our shared experience, something settled in me and came to peace. I understand more now about the extent of the spiritual journeying that Heather has experienced in the world at large, and somehow understand why Heather is the extraordinary human being that she is. We are all immensely blessed to have you here on earth, beloved. Thank you for coming. Thank you for landing. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have glasses to raise, but let's just raise our energy to the author Heather Rose and to her miraculous, magical memoir, Nothing Bad Ever Happens Here. May it shine in the world.
I would now like to welcome Tania Price, who will be in conversation with Heather about Nothing Bad Ever Happens Here. Tania has had a career in media relations and issues management in the corporate and political arenas, and relocated to Tasmania to pursue her interest in the visual arts. She now has a doctorate in the creative arts from UTAS and continues to paint. Heather and Tania first met when Tania arrived in Tasmania in 2009. Heather invited her to join the board of Festival of Voices, where she served for many years. Tania is now chair of Hobart's Theatre Royal Management Board. She lives in Hobart. Thank you, Tania and Heather.
It's so lovely to see you all here. I'm so thrilled. It's great. All right, you have questions, so let's get serious.
I want to start by saying congratulations.
Thank you.
On what you have described as by far the most difficult to produce of the 9 books that you've written throughout your career. Why was it so difficult?
Well, the delight of writing a novel is that a character will arrive for me in my imagination, maybe a cast of characters, and almost certainly a scene of some sort. And then I follow that along and I find the story. But this time I had to go back and find myself, and I had to find my little self and my teenage self and my 20-something self and then my 30-something self, and it was really hard to do. It was, I mean, I have kept a lot of journals in my lifetime, so I have journals all the way back to my teenage years. There's a big chunk of them. But it was so hard, not simply to locate myself again, but then to realise the fragility of myself at certain times in my life, and the sense of vulnerability and wonder. Finding the wonder in my little self was really extraordinary. Finding the sort of the vulnerability and the brokenness of my teenage years, finding, you know, this vulnerable and somewhat reckless 20-something-year-old, and then, you know, and then the challenges that came beyond that. It was really hard to see, really hard to revisit, and often re-traumatising. And I didn't expect that. I didn't realise. I mean, a novel is just a breeze compared to doing a memoir, in my experience. And a novel is difficult because of plot and structure and voice and narrative flow, and Danielle knows all the pedantry of language. But the memoir was difficult because I had to somehow find a wholeness to the person that was at the heart of the book. And in order to do that, I somehow had to integrate all these things into myself. And I'd never done that before. I'd never seen that before. I'd never seen myself in the way that it caused me to see myself.
So why was it so important for you to write a memoir? Why stick with it when it was so difficult?
Yeah, well, exactly. I started it because I turned 50 and I was really unwell, and I thought I probably ought to write these stories down for my children, because they had often said, you ought to write these down, and lots of people had said, you ought to write these stories down. And so I started, and then I dallied. You know, it was really hard, and there were a lot of stories. And how do you colour life? I'm nearly 60. How do you colour life back to a certain amount of words? What's important? What's not important? And ultimately, I had to write everything in order to be able to get some sense of what is it ultimately going to be. And poor Gabby and Jane and the beloved Ali Laveau, who's my brilliant editor and has worked with me on 5 or 6 of my novels, they all received this like 135,000 word sort of, you know, brick. And I was like, but I don't know what to do with it now. And
their problem.
yeah. And they came back to me and said, look, you've got one memoir is family and recipes and children and all of that sort of stuff. One memoir is travel stories and writing and anecdotes. And one story is the spiritual story. And that's the one you need to do. And as a number of my dear friends know, that's the one I did not want to confess to. I think I actually wrote everything else around it to hide it. And when I realised, but when Jane Porfriman tells you, and when Gabby Nair tells you, and when Ali Laveau tells you, look, that's the one, I had to get braver than I've probably ever had to get in my life, because I know this seems ridiculous to all of you who know me so well, but I actually didn't want to be seen as a spiritual person, because I thought it meant you had to have answers, and I don't have any answers.
You have said that you felt you owed the readers of your previous books a sense of the person who had been at the heart of all those books. And yet, what the memoir also does is reveal to the reader how much of yourself and your life experiences have actually formed the basis of your novels and their characters. So has producing this memoir and having had to revisit and work through so many of your formative experiences given you a greater insight into where your fictional characters and storylines have come from?
That's such an interesting question. I've actually not really considered that, but I think it's made my creative landscape clearer. I actually feel that I've given myself a certain freedom. I thank you. I've just noticed that. That's good. I do. I feel more free. Yeah, it's as if that probably was quite a busy thing in the back of my mind. Not intentionally, but it's just there. And something about writing this has I actually feel liberated to write whatever on earth I want to write now. It's not that I didn't do that before, but there were things trying to come out, I suspect,
yes.
that came out in the books, as you
yes.
say. And I didn't mean for them to come out in the books, just let me in. And Melinda, where is Melinda? Oh, there you are. The light's right behind you. Melinda pointed this out to me, I think with Whiteheart. She pointed out that I'd put in the neighbours to our nans and stuff like that, and I didn't even remember. But yes, these things do accidentally pop up in
Yes, I'm not sure how accidental it is. I recall when I first read Museum of Modern Love being almost shocked by the parallels that I saw in your character Lydia, her feelings and sensibility, and in where you were in your life at the time. I thought it was a very brave thing.
Yes, but the amazing thing about that, as you know, was that it took 11 years to write that book. And so I wrote it, and then after it came out, it became much more like Lydia's life.
Yes. A lot of circles here.
That was very strange. That was very
You do
strange.
actually admit to this in the memoir, I think, to a degree. You say that in the process of revisiting a book and its characters, you realise that you had probably been hiding in plain sight after all, which I think
I did have that. I picked one of them up recently to, reference something and was quite startled by that. I thought, ooh.
Heather, you've always been a strong advocate for the development of any would-be writer's imaginative powers. But do you think artists are as much a product of their experience as their imagination? Or artists generally?
I suspect all people who follow a creative life have a very rich imagination. Despite whatever form of art you choose to pursue. And I know there's lots of artists and writers here tonight. I wonder whether imagination comes, or whether it's because of the emotional landscape that you come into, or the physical I wonder to what extent all those things play a part. But they're obviously there's a varied process, because people spring up everywhere from all sorts of backgrounds, don't they? But I think in Tasmania it's so evident to me, and I'm sure for many of us who are artists here in Tasmania, how rich it is as a place of physical landscape, light and seasons and beauty, as well as an enormous community of really interesting and fascinating people. So that is rich. And of course the visual arts, it's spectacular for that. I don't know if that really... That's a very curious thing. I don't know.
Well, yes, it's interesting, isn't it, the thread between the two, and whether one takes off from the other. Or
what do you think?
Well, I think I'm more experienced, more on the experience side, but probably the imaginative side comes out of that, doesn't it? The need to do something, in a sense, do something, create something out of your experiences.
I was really lucky to have the parents that I have. Like, Mum was reading rhyming poetry to me and wonderful little golden books. And, because my sister was born almost exactly 3 years after me, just at this pivotal age in my development, Mum's got me sitting beside her on the couch, reading to me while she's breastfeeding my sister. And it was how I learned to read, because Mum read and read and read, and eventually I just realised, that's how the words suddenly started to make sense, and I've talked about this in the memoir. And so to have a mum with so much fun. There was always rhyming poetry, always limericks, always jokes, always a theatrical quality to life. And then I had my dad, who had this serious love of literature and introduced me so early to, Faulkner and then to the Russians. And so I was fostered, thanks to the State Library, let me say, because we didn't own hardly any books. But Dad and Mum both took me to the library, and I would just plough through books every week. And, it's one of the great benefits of libraries. They really are such an important part of our society, because for those of us who can't afford books, there is a wellspring for imagination for any future writer or creator.
And perhaps that's what taught you how to use your experiences for imaginative purposes.
Yes, I think that's true. Yes, and to go into the library and realise all these other people had done this thing, and that stories were so fascinating to me from such an early age. They made a big impression. I know I talk about this, and some of you will have heard this story before, but when I was 6, my dad took me to the library, and for the first time I went into the adult section. And for years and years after I left Tasmania, I used to think that there was actually a step up into the adult section of the library, because that's how it felt, that we went over into the adult section and he pulled this little slender volume off the shelf, and it was The Old Man and the Sea. And I had to renew it. He went back and renewed it a couple of times. And to those of you who know it, it's such a short book. But it was about fishing, so I love fishing. But I remember getting to the end of that book and being so devastated by the ending, because I'd never read a book with a sad ending before. And thinking, writing doesn't just take you places, it makes you feel things. And then there was definitely a feeling then of like, if I was going to write, that's the sort of writer I would want to be.
A central theme of this book is a significant role in your life, not so much of imagination, but of forces in the universe, as we've spoken about, the sort of spiritual side of things that we don't understand generally, and of things that you've experienced that were very real to you and had very real effects on you, but that can't be explained by our Western notion of reality. When I read The River Wife, your third novel, I actually struggled a bit with why you felt the need to go off into that sort of shape-shifting fantasy world as I saw it. But having read the memoir, I now wonder if The River Wife was absolutely a result of your sense of reality. Is that how you feel about it? Have you been trying all along to explore some of these unknown parts of our consciousness that you yourself have experienced?
I think that's probably true, although accidentally, I have to say, because I know Danielle. Where are you, Danielle? She's here. Oh, there you are, sweet. Hello. There was this moment where Danielle and I, as you know, wrote the trilogy children's books under the name Angelica Banks, and there was a moment where the first book, or the second book, I can't remember, was nominated for Best Children's Fantasy Novel. And Danielle rang me to tell me, and I said, but it's not a fantasy novel. She's like, yes, darling, it is. But that's what writers do. We fly out the window and go to visit other lands, don't we? And yeah, so I haven't, this is the thing, and, my children know this well. I often miss the most obvious things. So yes, probably. Probably.
I think it is one of the extraordinary, well, it was for me one of the extraordinary things in the memoir to realise how for you there is that marriage between your reality and in a sense this other world.
Yes, it's a porous experience for me. Yes.
You write in your memoir about your acceptance of everything that's happened to you and the choices made along the way, because that's what it took to get you to where you are. But is there anything, other than rejecting a blood transfusion after the birth of your second child, that you mentioned in the memoir, that you regret?
I think I made a decision quite, probably in my early 20s, that I wasn't going to regret anything. It just seemed such a waste of time. And it's much better, I think, to learn from something than to go along regretting it. So, is there anything that I would do differently? Oh, look, my wiser self, now that I'm this old, might have told that girl when she's in her early 20s and decides, because she's having strange dreams and needs to go off to be with the Native Americans, that it was maybe a reckless and, and possibly dangerous thing to do. But otherwise I wouldn't have done it.
But in no way do you regret having done it.
No. And in a way I suspect that's partly why the book has ended up being called Nothing Bad Ever Happens Here, because maybe nothing bad ever happens here, and maybe there really isn't anything to regret. Maybe it's all perfect. Maybe it's all good. It's hard to believe that, because there is a lot that we can look at right now and say that's clearly not good. But maybe somewhere in all of this it's not about good and bad, and it's not about right and wrong. It's just what is.
Yes, and it's coming to an acceptance of that.
Yeah, it's a form of surrender, I think, ultimately, which I suspect is what health has taught me.
Indeed. You were given a piece of advice early in your advertising career that if you didn't get on with your dream of becoming a writer, you'd risk ending up with a headstone that said, "Here lies Heather Rose, who wrote the great Coke commercial." I don't think that's going to be the case, but what would you like to be written on your headstone?
I used to think that I would like it to say, "I made the most of every moment." And that has been a great mantra for me in life, I have to say. But now that I've finished the memoir, if people came to visit my grave, I don't want a grave, by the way, but I just want to be dispersed. I think I'd like it to say, "Choose joy."
Okay, remember that, everybody.
Yeah, choose joy. Because I wouldn't want anyone to grieve for me, and joy is always a choice. And that's one of the things I realised as I was working on the memoir, is that so often the thing that has kept the chronic pain at bay has been joy. And there's, to me, an inverse relationship between those two things. The more pain I allow myself to feel, the sadder I feel. Whereas the more joyful I feel, the less pain I can feel. So it's been a very powerful lesson for me to choose joy on a daily basis.
And that is an active choice. Yeah.
It's an active choice, yeah. So if I could, I might as well write a billboard on my gravestone.
Indeed.
Just choose joy. That's good.
I don't know how we're doing time-wise. 2 minutes? All right, well, let's just look to the future now. You're working on a historical novel at the moment,
Yes.
and there are also plans in the pipeline for filming next year of both a series based on Bruni and a film based on Museum of Modern Love. Is that right?
They're both in development, and the beautiful Virginia Whitwell, who is the producer of the film for the Museum of Modern Love, is here tonight. I'm so grateful to you being here, Virginia. It's lovely to have you. And Sue Maslin and Charlotte Seymour, who are the producers of the Bruni TV series, sent their love. They couldn't be here because they've been in the UK. They are in the UK getting funding and sorting out streaming platforms and all that. And Virginia will know much better than I when you're anticipating. I mean, do we know
anything? Let's put you on the
yet?
spot here.
It's a long. These are long things, and they're like camels through the eye of a needle. So we wait, and if it happens, it's great, and if it doesn't, it was a lovely fantasy.
And what about the novel? Anything you'd like to?
Oh, the novel!
let us
I'm
in
having
on?
such. I've had to put it aside, of course, in the lead up to all this, and we are moving house, so I get back to it in January, and I'm really looking forward to it. I worked really hard on it through last year and for several years I've been working on it. There's a lot of research, so I'm taking sort of the 1700s and looking at how we ended up here if you go back to the birth of the Industrial Revolution, because it seems to me that no one here will be surprised to hear me say this, but we're a bit fucked economically, and we're really fucked environmentally, and it's that the economy and the environment that we've ended up with have caused us to live in a world that's dangerous for our children and our grandchildren. And it's mentally unsafe, it's physically unsafe, we have no certainty for them. How are they meant to go forward with the legacy that we've left them? So I thought I would just tackle that by way of by way of some people who turn up here in Tasmania back in the early 1800s and who are loosely based on family history.
Well, good to know you're going back to the easy stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you, Tania. Thank you. I have some thank yous to give before Melinda comes back up onto the stage. To all of you here tonight, all of you, it's so beautiful to see you all, and so many friends, so many stories, so many great times together. Thank you all for being here. It means the world to me to have a writing community like I do here in Hobart and in Tasmania. I mean, I want you to know that to be a writer in Hobart is the most delicious experience because you're such good readers, you're such good supporters of the arts. And I have some of my students here tonight too, which is so wonderful. And I'm so appreciative of how much support you've all given me over 9 books. Thank you. Thank you so much. Melinda, my darling sister, and an early reader of this manuscript and a reader of several drafts of this manuscript, and in fact an early reader of many of my books. She's a prolific reader herself and a great friend, and we have, been through 55 years of your life, 58 of mine together, and thank you, sweetheart. You've done such a beautiful job tonight, and it means the world to me to have you here. Thank you. To Tania, yes. Tania, thank you. You're such a wonderful friend. Thank you for the gift of your friendship and for the beautiful questions. Thank you. Jane, publisher extraordinaire. To be an author of Jane's is both the greatest gift but also quite terrifying. Because I have to show up with something worthwhile for Jane Palfreyman, and it's a great bar to have to meet, I have to say. Thank you. You've made me a better writer every single time because I have to work with something that is going to impress you. It's great. Thank you. And Jane, we really are Jane's loyal authors. Jane is surrounded by so many brilliant people in the literary world, and it's a privilege to have got to know some of them, so thank you for all of them too. Gabby, 25 years, so much has happened. Thank you for trusting me way back. Poor Gabby, can you imagine her? I ring her up and I say, I've got a new novel on the go, and this time I'm going to look at, there's this Serbian performance artist, and I think I'm going to write about her. And she's like, what? And then after that, and this big success of the Museum of Modern Love, now, Heather, what are you doing next? And I go, I think I'm going to write about this political family in Tasmania. She goes, no, Heather, that's not the book. That's not the book the world wants to read afterwards. It's so great. And then I'm going to write a memoir, and Jane's like, don't write a memoir, write another novel. Gabby's like, no, she has to write the memoir. So it's been an amazing journey together. Thank you for trusting me and to keeping on being that person who reads the terrible draft and gives me such wonderful feedback. And because Gabby is such an extraordinary writer herself and so wise in all things and a wonderful negotiator, it's so brilliant to have you by my side. Thank you. My career is because of you. Thank you. Davini, darling, thank you. You made me cry again. Thank you. Yes. Virginia, I've already acknowledged you. Thank you for coming from Melbourne. And my darling friends Harrison Young and Helen Silver, who have come from Melbourne too. Harrison and I have been friends for years and years and years. We met at APEC when I was a businesswoman and I sat down next to him at lunch. We were at a group lunch at APEC in Sydney, the one George Bush came to. And I was speaking to someone else who was quite tedious, and I turned to the person beside me and I said, "Hi, I'm Heather." And he said, "Hello, I'm Harris." And I said, "What do you do?" And he said, "Well, I'm a director of the Bank of England and I'm the head of the Asia Society in Australia, but I really like to write novels." So I was like, "Oh, phew." And we've been dear friends ever since. It's so beautiful to have you both here. Thank you so much for coming. Also, my friend Amy, where are you? Who has come down from Queensland. Thank you, beautiful. Amy is one of my students. Nadia is one of my students. Shirley is one of my students. Are there any other of my students in the room? Oh, hello. Oh my God, how are you? Oh, excellent, fantastic. It's just such a treat. And Danielle has made that possible for me many times too through the university where I've had the chance to tutor and lecture down there. So it's been a great gift to be able to bring on new writers. It's been delightful. Mary and Chris, darling, thank you. Chris Reese and Mary printed out all the reserved stickers, and Chris has been wonderful at saying, what do you need? And Mary and my beloved Brett and my beloved Amy all did welcoming and gathering and bringing people in. So appreciate your help and support and all your love. And of course, these are my early readers also. So Brett, I'm reading things aloud to Brett as we're driving around on the Tasman Peninsula and we're crying and it's raining and it was beautiful. And Mary has read numerous drafts. Amy has read drafts. The early readers are so important. Michael Gissing is the marvellous filmmaker and sound engineer who's here tonight, and Michael has just recorded me reading the audiobook of the memoir. Thank you, Michael. Christine Farmer is my brilliant publicist. I could not be more grateful. Christine is the most formidable publicist in Australia, and I'm so grateful because she gets the book out into the world and into the hands of readers. Thank you, Christine. She works tirelessly too. Thank you. Thank you so much. Tim, the new owner of Fuller's Bookshop, so delighted to have this event with you. Thank you. And I'm so thrilled that you've taken over the ownership, and I wish you every success. To the RSCV Hotel and Scene Change, Aidan, thank you very much for the hospitality here at the RSCV again, and for AV support. Thank you. My beautiful children, 2 of whom are here tonight, early readers, constant supporters, inspiration, and of course so much of the matrix of this memoir. Thank you. Where's my Belle? There you are, darling. Belle has also been responsible for creating the beautiful bookmarks that will come with the first 50 copies or so of the book, and maybe 120. Oh, excellent, 120. She's so amazing. At 3 a.m, she's done a marvellous job. She worked with a designer who's made these beautiful bookmarks. So thank you, darling. And all your running around today, thank you. And my fellow writers who are here, thank you all for the solidarity of our community and for the joy of sharing the writing life with you all. It's so wonderful to have a rich community of fellow authors. My mum and my dad, thank you both. I know it can't be easy when your child brings out a memoir. Thank you for being generous and kind and loving, and for everything that you've contributed, each of you, to this memoir. I would not literally be here without you, but I wouldn't be the person I am without the beautiful influences that you've both had on my life. Thank you so much. And Evan, darling, thank you. You've just held me so beautifully through the hard parts of this last year and a half of working on this book, and He's found me in a puddle on the couches several times and pulled me together and fed me and poured wine down my throat and just tenderly shepherded me through this excruciating and ultimately life-affirming experience. Thank you so much for all the love that you give me and sharing this writing life. It's such a privilege to be with you. Thank you. Yes. So I'll be happy to sign books in the foyer, but because I'm going on the road now for about a month, I would really appreciate it if you could mask up, and I will mask up too, because there is a lot of COVID floating around apparently, and especially as I go on the road, I really want to not take anything with me. And there are also the most exquisite chocolates. For those of you who come past and get a book signed, there are chocolates from the beautiful John and Connie from Nut Patch that John has brought here as a gift to me. So please come and share in John's exquisite chocolates. If you don't know the Nut Patch, it's down on Salamanca, on the waterfront, and it's beside... It's near where Hobart used to be. Yeah, it is. John makes chocolates for the stars. He is unbelievably beautiful at making these exquisite, and they taste as good as they look. So please, if you would like a book signed, you can have a chocolate. So thank you again, all of you, and Melinda, I'll hand back to you, beautiful.
Thank you both for the conversation. I am, as some of the authors in the room know, I'm quite an in conversation fan. I love listening to our authors speak, so thank you, it's wonderful. So that concludes the formalities of the evening. And as you may have already read or seen in the paper, at the root of this beautifully written memoir is a tragedy which affected our family many years ago. Revisiting this has been most challenging and emotional journey for my family. We are so proud of you, my dear sister. As our parents taught us, you have gone bravely. And it is surprising that the gifts that life throws when one throws caution to the wind. Congratulations, dearest. So, dear readers, please feel free to purchase copies from the sales table at the entrance, with your masks on preferably. Heather will be available for signings, so feel free to grab a few copies for Christmas gifts, only 50 days away. As this is a rare opportunity to have them personalised. Thank you for your attendance tonight and for being part of sending this beautiful book out into the world. May it travel far and wide. Yes.
And this is my mum, Joanne.